S.D. Boyan.
This is the Doc with SilverDoctors.com. Joining us again is Harvey Organ of Harvey Organ's Gold and Silver Report. Thanks for joining us again, Harvey.
Oh, thank you, John. And how's everything with you?
Doing well here, trying to get through the holiday season.
Right, yeah.
Why don't we start right off with the recent price action in the metals, Harvey? With all the focus in the last month or so being on the fiscal cliff, everyone seems already to have forgotten that QE4 was announced a couple weeks ago, which increased QE to $85 billion a month. So what's your take on an explanation for the absolute hammering the metals have received ever since the QE4 announcement?
Well, the reason for the hammering is the control that the bankers need to get under this circumstance. When you start printing massively, and this is for the first time, you're seeing this done globally. This is not just the United States. You're seeing Europe, you're seeing Japan, you're seeing QE going on globally all at once. So the bankers are nervous as hell. And what they have to do is kind of dampen the paper market of gold, but at the same time, they're probably personally purchasing the metal on their own side of things, basically in line with China and Russia and all the stands, Uzbekistan, and you've got Iraq purchasing and Iran's purchasing gold. I mean, this is taking a huge toll out of London. And as you know, London is really 100-to-1 physical to paper gold. And the problem is that when you start removing that 1 ounce of real gold going to China and everything else, you put a tremendous pressure on the bankers as they got nothing but hot air. And this is why you're seeing a lot of stories of hypothecation, rehypothecation, stealing of allocated gold, and they're probably doing that. And then, of course, you're seeing the odd story of tungsten-filled bars, and I can probably think the Americans will be pretty good at that too. And that's probably what's happened, is the end game is being played out, and the bankers certainly don't want you to win. They want to win. And I can assure you that I can actually tell you when you know the game is over is when you hear Goldman Sachs on the buy side of gold. And at that point, you have a plethora of buyers and you have no sellers, and the game is over. The paper's finished.
I'm sure you read, as most of our readers are aware, just last week, Jim Sinclair essentially said the same thing, that this controlled and manipulated takedown will be over as soon as Goldman and the rest of the Goldmans of the world have basically acquired every last ounce that they can get their hands on.
That's perfectly correct. If you recall, when O'Malley, the fifth commissioner, asked one of the questions that he asked was on March the 2010, and he asked me, "Well, could the Comex default?" I stared up in the sky for a few seconds, and then I said, "Yeah, I can see it. It will default." And I said, "It's going to default when all the gold leaves the U.S. shores and lands in China and lands in Russia and South Korea." And he looks at South Korea, and I said, "South Korea," because nobody would think South Korea with its huge naval base and everything else. But sure enough, South Korea is purchasing gold to a high degree. So you're now seeing India, you're seeing the all Eastern nations of Eastern persuasion buying physical. They're not buying paper. The only one who really bought paper was Mexico, and they certainly found out the hard way. Mexico, when they bought 100 tons, it found out it was unallocated, and they just got a piece of paper. So I think they're trying now And you're now hearing stories of countries like Germany, Austria, and they're now trying to repatriate their gold back to their homeland. And that's when you start realizing the pressure is on London. Because the moment that's taken out, of course, you now have the derivative mess. And the derivative mess will be huge. And then you'll probably see a default in London. You'll see a default in the Comex. And that'll do it. Which is why, like, I was speaking with Mark Chilton, and he was telling me that he used the following words. They're wrapping the silver probe up in September. And he expects to have a reading on what goes on probably in October. Okay, and I said, okay, well, that's fine. And then all of a sudden, it's now November or now December. They can't release it. Why? Because it's the government behind everything. And they can't because it'll be they're behind all the trades, and they're making such a mess of things. Like they cannot, for the life of them, release the results. You know, because no matter what happens, they'll be found guilty of a crime here.
So well, let's talk about the Comex and your thoughts on default. Let's talk about the December delivery. We've seen the amount of long-standing for delivery actually increase throughout the month, which is a pretty extraordinary development. So what's your take and what's going on in Comex Silver this month, Harvey?
Okay, actually, that has never happened before. I've been watching this on an active month. Usually what happens is that the deliveries are the highest in the first 3 days, 4 days, and they'll go down a bit as you're probably having a bit of cash settlements. What happened in this one in December, on December 6th, we saw the low point. I believe it was 12.6. And then all of a sudden it turned around. And then we saw 13, 14, and now we're at, 19.5 million ounces of silver standing. But I'm going to tell you something that really bothers me. And I've been trying to get an answer from the CFTC, and I cannot. And maybe some of you guys out there figure this thing out. There's one vault called CNT, and every single deposit or every single withdrawal or every single adjustment is done with 3 decimals at 000. The Comex is a physical market. It's strictly physical. You're going to see oddball numbers. I like to see 100.08 ounces or 102.128 ounces. I mean, the odds, I can understand 1 bar, maybe 2 bars adding up to 0.000. But when I start seeing everything, I get suspicious. And I have a strange feeling that they're settling in paper. In other words, it's a paper settlement. And the owners don't know it. They just think that they're getting a real thing, and it's So, actually, what's actually happened? There's been a large increase in the number of investors wishing to get their silver out of a registered Comex vault. In other words, they're asking for their silver, but making sure it's not a Comex vault, and they're making sure it's not, I think, HSBC and JP Morgan. They're making sure that those two are not involved. So maybe that is something behind all the crazy antics what's going on. But anyway, that's what I'm seeing on the silver. The other thing that you should be very mindful of, you're seeing gold, the open interest on gold kind of decline. It's now at 425. It's very low, and it kind of tells you that a lot of the players realize the game is fixed. It's a rigged casino, and they don't really want to play the Comex gold anymore. But it's not so in silver. You will know that it's remained relatively high at 140,000 or higher constantly for the last 2-3 months. No matter what, impervious to price. It doesn't matter what the price is. Which tells me that certain people are really in the know what goes on, and they're kind of taking these guys on. They know they're standing. They know exactly what they can take out of the Comex. They know exactly what's going on, and I think that is what's really going on at the silver front.
The one thing several readers have been asking, with the apparent shortage of the physical silver and the interesting contrast in what you said the first time in history, that the amount of long-standing for delivery has increased throughout the month.
Yes.
So I guess explain to readers with the background of the overall Comex inventories, both for registered registered and eligible are increased off of recent lows, say spring of 2011, when they, I think, registered hit 26 million ounces, and the total inventories, I think, dipped down to 98, 99 million ounces, and they're
That is correct. Yes.
quite a bit off of those recent lows now. So do you think those will draw down more overall in the next bull run? Is it something that it's just completely a paper number? What are your thoughts on that?
You get it. I have no faith whatsoever in the total registered nor the total eligible silver that they record. And for the simple reason, I'm seeing too much of the 000s and the paper, and it's really not there. And I remember, I'm always note that this is a physical market. I want to see physical gold and silver. And when I see 000s constantly there, I think that it's a paper being inserted in the vault there as an obligation of somebody. You see, and exactly what's going on in London. There's no difference. London is fixed with obligations. That same ounce of gold is obligated to so many others. And I think that's what's going to happen at the Comex. And when this game ends, that's why MF Global was confiscated. You know, JP Morgan owed all its gold, or maybe some silver as well. You know, so they just took it to London. You know, it's a crooked game. Which is basically why nobody should be playing the Comex. My suggestion to all of you is, don't, you know, as I say all along, just go buy physical metal and be thankful that you got it so cheap. You know, and you know, never ask what the price is. The most important thing is it's amazing what you will be able to buy eventually with your silver and gold when this game ends. And you know, that's the big message that I can give you.
So essentially, the Comex inventories, both the registered and eligible inventories, you have no faith at all in the validity of the current inventories that they report anymore.
I have zero faith, and I can tell you when I tell my problem. But you know, the other thing I can tell you, when you write to the CFTC commissioners, 4 of them will refuse to respond to you. They never responded to anybody. The only guy who responds is a great guy, is Bart Chilton, but he's 1 out of 5 commissioners. He'll respond to you. What was interesting is when I relay my concerns on these, you know, he can't answer. He probably knows, but he just can't answer. And it's a simple question. You know, he knows it's a physical market. He tells me all the time it's a physical market. How could it possibly be 000? You know, it just can't be. And why, when there's settlements, why isn't there going from the register down to the eligible? Nothing goes into the dealer. You know, they have to settle. Are they settling it through the adjustments? You know, it's the figures that they give us seem to be a phony. It's a phony nature. The other thing that certainly is of concern is the huge numbers that are going through the silver as opposed to gold. Gold generally on any given day is quite comatose. You know, even today, you saw very little. It's a deposit of 3,800 ounces. That's it. Then you start going down to silver, and it's every day. Huge deposits, huge adjustments. It's every day. That tells you, the fact is that that it's so high in numbers every single day means they're short, and they're scrambling. They're scrambling to pay Peter, to pay Paul, down in London, down in China, who's asking for it, you know. So anyway, the other thing that's really coming out now is what I hypothesized years ago, when I kind of thought that China was the main source of the actual short. And it now seems that Turk and a few others think that that's now the case. And the reason I thought this is because China had originally 300 million ounces way back 1949, and they didn't know what to do with it, so they started. It never went to Taiwan. Like Taiwan got the gold, the 69 tons, but the silver stayed in China for many years until China started to westernize. And I think that this silver somehow became the inventory for the SLV originally, and along with Buffett's. So you had Buffett's, silver, and this. Right? And together, we are now seeing all this inventory go, and China is now manipulating the silver markets down to pick up silver, and silver is going through the roof in China. They're massively importing tremendous amounts of silver. So it's not just gold; it's silver as well, and that is going to be really damaging to J.P. Morgan, who's massively short, huge short position, and they just cannot cover no matter what. They just cannot cover.
Why don't we segue a little bit, touching back on your previous thought about this shortage and focusing on the physical markets to the recent announcement by the U.S. Mint that they'd be essentially suspending sales of the Silver Eagles for about 3 weeks. They cut off the sales of the 2012 Silver Eagles about, a week and a half or 2 weeks prior to the end of December. And they announced that the 2013s would not be available until January 7th at the earliest. Now, up there in Canada, the Canadian Mint already has the 2013 Maples in production at the dealers and the wholesalers already. So what's your thought about the U.S. Mint suspending the Silver Eagle sales? Yeah. Shortage issue, or are they trying to prevent retail investors from acquiring the metal during the recent smash in December? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, is it the numismatic that they're suspending, or is it is there any bullion silver they're making, or they're suspending all sales?
They've suspended all sales. I know at SD Bullion, all of our suppliers, and we're talking about the largest suppliers that buy directly from the U.S. Mint, they're all sold out, and they cannot. The U.S. Mint will not resell.
Then that is a real indication of shortage. I don't know if you've had a look at the Canadian maple sales. I mean, I was shocked when I saw this yesterday. We started, 1984, 85, it was 200,000. And now I think it's 17 million or 20 million ounces in Canada? I mean, my goodness, so a lot of the Canadian stuff is being exported out. So the Mint's making money. So, I mean, certainly the demand is there. And the fact is that they're calling off the end of 2012, beginning of 2000. Obviously, they just don't have the silver to make them, and you can just tell that in the demand. In silver, the United States produces about 40 million ounces of silver, and generally, that is how much the mines produce in Canada and in the United States. Which generally means that the United States, in order to fulfill their duties to supply silver, they need to get some Mexico. But then you have the jewelers who are going to need, and then you have the tremendous usage of pharmaceuticals for silver. And Europe needs it, and for solar panels. And, it's amazing. Actually, the only amount, I think, of the, what did I read? It's only 100 million ounces of the total demand for silver goes for investment. 900 million ounces goes for scientific uses, conducting of electric wires, antibacterials, burns, stuff like that. So it kind of shows you the huge demand and the new uses. There's new uses for silver all the time. And every day they invent something, and sure enough, they invented a new one. AstraZeneca has come out with a new one in gold. Okay, where they use gold nanoparticles to find a tumor. And this is the latest research that's coming on. So these metals are finding more and more usage, and it's a crying shame what these banks have done. Is they are eliminating the supply. And I really think the ultimate treason is that our gold and silver are leaving our shores and heading to eastern shores. And eventually we won't have any. Just like the rare earths and things like that, we won't have any. And that's bad. I think that's the treason. But that's another matter. Okay?
All right, well, before we let you go, why don't you give us your outlook for the first 6 months of 2013? What do you see in the metals? Do you see the manipulation continuing? It's seemingly stranglehold on gold and silver right now, with gold capped around 1650, 1660, and silver right around 30 as we close out or get ready to close out 2012. Do you see the about a 1.5 or 2 year long now corrections continuing, or are we about ready to break out to the upside?
Well, first of all, I don't think that this manipulation can last this long. I'll be surprised. I think you're going to see a resolution of things probably by March. But I think we have to be very careful now that we're going through the fiscal cliff. And as such as that you've seen, every time the Dow plummets, so they hit gold and silver. They don't want they're knocking out the thermometer. They don't want to show that things are that bad. Okay, so I'd be careful. I wouldn't, as far as I'm concerned, I really don't pay much attention to the price. I just go out and buy your physical, and just be thankful for the price, because that's what the game is. You're really getting it cheaply, because the bankers are stupid. They're playing the see. Actually, one of the questions of the CFTC was the motto of them is that the CFTC, the Comex is a price discovery mechanism. In other words, it leads to a price properly, but not the price. Now we're seeing that the Comex is the price. Why? Because the bankers whack and they give 100,000 contracts, knock the price down, which is totally against their model. And they know this. I told them that. I says, well, don't you stand by what you say? It's written right here. You pointed them on the wall. This is what it says. And yet, you're not abiding by what you stand behind. So the answer is that you're in tough times right now. The United States has got a huge deficit. They got a fiscal cliff. They got a shortfall deficit of probably 1.3 trillion, and there won't be an agreement probably by January 1st, and then and then you're going to see chaos come in, and you're going to see Dow going down probably 200-300 points, and then they're going to try to that's probably when the authorities, not really authorities, the politicians will start to get their act together and try to make some sort of deal. And I'm afraid, but that's actually my worst fear, is they probably make a deal which is not very good. Maybe good for silver and gold, because at that point there'd be no stopping silver and gold at that point. But I'm afraid that the economy will be so bad for all of us. Is what you're seeing in Spain, you're seeing in Greece. And the economy there is in shambles, and that's what I'm afraid that will come here, and that's my fear.
All right, well, there you have it. Harvey Organ of Harvey Organ's Gold and Silver Report. The manipulation has till March at the latest.
Oh, yes.
Well, thanks again for joining us once again, Harvey. It was great to have you back.
Oh, thank you, John. Anytime.
All right, take care, Harvey.
Okay, bye-bye.